All right, so I'm Paul Speciale. I'm VP of Product Management, and the next topic that Giorgio, our CTO, and myself are going to take you through is our multi-cloud vision, our multi-cloud product called Zenko. So as a means of starting, a couple of years ago, we would have stood here and said the major trend we're seeing is the S3 API, right? Object storage finally got its de facto or default API. I think there's a much more notable trend that we're seeing now, and that is that enterprise customers really want to integrate their workflows with public cloud, right? So it's not that they're stopping their on-prem storage deployments, but instead, what they're telling us is that they have a need to push some of that data, or all of that data, to the public cloud, usually to leverage some service that sits in the cloud. Okay, so you can think of this as use cases for active data. You have a workflow, for example, in media, where you're creating videos and you need to push them to the cloud to use something like the content delivery network, of which Amazon has one and Azure has one. You might want to move the data to the compute burst in the public cloud. On the other hand, there's certainly still a case for putting long-term cold storage in the public cloud. But I would say that as a trend, we're hearing this across the board, and something I want to do now is give you a little bit of a flavor for the types of use cases that we're hearing. So I guess to characterize it, we hear content distribution, we hear compute bursting, we hear analytics, and then of course the one that we've all heard about for many, many years is long-term cold storage archiving. So media, we've been working with a pretty big media customer for years. I think Paul mentioned them, Bloomberg Media. For about a year, they've been working with, a little over a year, they've been working with the Ring as a consolidated media store on-prem. So this is in their data centers in various locations around the globe. However, they use Amazon, and they have Amazon as a way to deliver their content. One of the things that they told us about a year ago was that they didn't want to depend on one cloud. They really had a multi-cloud vision, so they wanted to decouple their dependency on that single cloud and also use Google Cloud Storage, use Azure Blob Storage, really for a few different reasons, right? One is that they want to be able to put the data near the service that they want to use. In some cases, the best service is in Google. In other cases, it's in another cloud, right? So that gives them choice. The second reason is one of business continuance reasons, right? If one of the services is unavailable, they have another one that they can rely on. And thirdly, there's this one of just lock-in, right? They don't want to be dependent on one vendor potentially locking them in or raising prices. So this gives them choice. So strategically, this is an initiative that they see as very strong. On top of all of that, if they're going to put data everywhere, how do they find it, right? So they've been very, very strong on driving us to provide a federated search capability. If I now have millions or more assets, in their case video assets, sprinkled around, how do I find them intelligently? In their case, it's a very media-specific type metadata model, but this can be more general attributes on objects, and the ability to do an intelligent search on that is the requirement that they've been asking for. Okay, so media is a very strong one, but it's not the only one. And we go have conversations now with people in things like biopharma, in financial services, aerospace, automotive manufacturing. Some of these are very, very interesting, right? Think about automotive from a connected car perspective, the need to feed sensor data into a central store, and perhaps put some of that in the cloud for compute bursting. We've heard the use case for even accessing big farms of GPUs to do number crunching. In the insurance industry, the idea of having claims and people taking photographs with their phones and sending those up to the cloud so that they can not only archive them, but make them accessible to the claims adjusters.
So maybe you'll go into it in a later stage, but how are you going to make sure that every object lives in different clouds?
Okay, so that's exactly where we're going to go.
Okay.
Right, right. So this is kind of the market driver behind the product called Zenko. But the key message we want to send to you is that what we're hearing is it's not just the cloud, it's not just one cloud. The message we're hearing is multi-cloud, right? So that's really what we're enabling. And you're absolutely right. We need some kind of intelligent metadata manager to track all of that, right? And that is in fact Zenko. Okay, so Paul introduced the name. Zenko, think of it as a multi-cloud data management controller. And really what it is it's an intelligent metadata manager that understands where the objects are in these various clouds and provides really 4 key capabilities. Okay? The first one, and sometimes overlooked, is what if we could give you a single interface that works across all of these clouds transparently, right? So now we're weaving S3 back into the equation here because lots of apps use S3, but not every cloud understands S3, right? So one of the things that Zenko does is it abstracts all of the clouds away underneath the Amazon S3 API, okay? Better than that, anytime it stores data in any cloud, so we decouple metadata from data, when we do the data puts to the underlying cloud, we do it through the native APIs, and it ends up in the native format in the underlying clouds. Okay, so what does this mean? This means if Zenko puts an object in Amazon, it's in a bucket as an object in Amazon, it's not encrypted, it's not obfuscated in some way. You can go list it, you can go see it, and you can read it out of the cloud natively. If it's in Azure, it ends up being a account container blob. Okay, so the translation is managed to the native format. The third one is you need a policy engine. How do you move the data around? Can you replicate it? Can you lifecycle it? Can you migrate it? Okay, so the third sort of key pillar of Zenko is this data management, data mover type of engine. And then finally, I mentioned search, right? Since we have all of this metadata of all of these objects, we capture a lot of system attributes. Applications can add their own application-defined key value pairs. All of that becomes searchable in a federated way. So across the namespace, if you did a search, you could retrieve them across any of the clouds.
So next question would be, where is the Zenko manager located?
So the metadata is managed in the Zenko engine. You can deploy it on-prem. You could deploy it in the cloud. So Zenko is an instance. It's a set of services running as Docker containers.
Does it support clustering and availability?
It does. Yeah, that's right. So the metadata manager
You're
is
asking
a...
the question.
Try to stump it. Go ahead.
You guys are the perfect lead-in. Yeah, so the metadata is a distributed consensus cluster. So it's HA, it's strongly consistent, it's highly available. It has all the properties that you would look for to make sure that this is highly resilient.
And this Zenko engine, is this based upon your previous Ring product?
The underlying metadata engine, we've done a lot of work, of course, in S3, in supporting the protocol very widely. So we have the core APIs, the advanced APIs for replication, versioning, all of that. And the meta engine is something that we built and have proven now for years in the Ring. That meta engine we can now use to extend attributes to understand that objects are also in the cloud, right? So this is kind of the core idea.
Is Zenko intended to become your flagship product and Ring will be deprecated?
We think that over time people value data management a lot, right? So the ability to store data wherever it's appropriate, whether it's in a local file system or in a NAS or in our Ring, that's less important than the business value of putting it where it's needed to be. So I think strategically we see this as very big.
Yeah, but there's always going to be paranoid possessive people who want it on
Sure.
in their control.
So does that mean
He
you
says
keep,
as a paranoid possessive person.
you're maintaining two
Yeah.
products?
For the foreseeable future, we have a very strong base in the Ring. People depend on it. It's not going away, right? But we think this is a data management value add capability on top of that to extend it out to the clouds.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you're doing a lot of indexing on the metadata.
Yeah.
You're not indexing the data itself today, content index.
We maintain the keys.
Can you partner with a content indexer to with possibly some intelligence to help you create more metadata tags based on what data is by its contents?
I think absolutely. So I think there's a slide coming up where I want to talk about extensions. One of the things we've done is put this in the open source as well. So we want the community to help us extend it for custom search capabilities and
Well, it's more about
metadata
once
extensions.
you have that capability and based on what you have, you kind of look like you have the foundations for the end-all, be-all of secondary copy data management.
I think the ability to extend this is something that we put in the core, right? So the ability for partners and ecosystem to work with us to make this, valuable, for example, as a search for GCPD or compliance or various other domains is exactly the idea.
Yeah, it's cool.
So I'll have Giorgio comment on that a little bit more as well.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
No, I'm just asking, is the data always consistent? Because if you're using objects, it's kind of a different story.
Right. So in terms of eventual or strong consistency to the clouds, our view, our namespace is strongly consistent, right? So what we present to the application, if we say we've acknowledged a right, we've acknowledged the right. Okay? So from our perspective, that's strong consistency.
Can Ring plug into Zenko as a
Yeah.
private
Yeah.
cloud instance.
Down the bottom.
Oh, it's
There's the
down.
ring. Right.
That is
So
small tech.
we will support Amazon, Amazon, Azure, Google, Ring, and then beyond that more.
And generically, anything that supports S3, logically.
S3 is easy, but it can be others. It can be other flavors. For example, the Azure mapping is not S3, right? We have to write to the blob storage API.
Yeah.
Right.
And we have demand for other backends, like an existing NAS. It would make sense to see it through Zenko as well.
Yeah, that's a very strong point. The media company specifically has hundreds of NAS filers, right? And that data is still valuable. So abstracting that as another pool is something they've talked about.
Well, can you just?
Yeah,
Oh,
Sure.
You might
Great.
be about to do it.
go ahead.
No, you might be about to do it.
Ah.
You're just about to talk about the open source. I was just going to say how much is open source and how much isn't.
Okay. So actually, maybe this is the right point for you to kind of chime in on the open source.
Yeah, absolutely.
Component.
So we started the open source effort a few years ago with a cloud server. I think it was July last year actually, and this is a RS3 API, and that's got something like 1 million downloads now on Docker Hub. I think you have a slide over here. And so we're pretty happy about that part of it. We've added new component this year to be able to build Zenko. And so there's two main pieces of Zenko open source. So Backbit is this engine to apply policies to your data. And when we talk about ecosystem, Backbit is plugin based. So if somebody wants to do a content filter, wants to do a various scan, wants to do any type of dedupe or processing of the data, Backbit is the right engine for that. So you build your plugin. We don't force you to use a language, whatever language you want. It's only a REST API. You build your plugin. It has to be a container. You load it into Zenko, and now you can apply this arbitrary processing to your data flow. Our metadata search, we call this Cluzo. This is the engine we use to search into all the object metadata. It doesn't matter if the object is in a different cloud, you can always search and hit our metadata. If it's over multiple sites, you will get locality of access as well. So that's the family of Cluzo. And the metadata engine, so you ask what's open source, what's not. The open source has a simple one machine metadata engine, while the commercial has the scale out distributed metadata engine that you can deploy over multiple sites. Okay.
That's right. So this is the open source edition with all of this functionality. We reserve really three things for the enterprise edition: the scale out metadata, the full distributed consensus cluster. We also do the full multi-tenancy model along the Amazon IAM model with multiple accounts and users and groups and all the policies. And then finally the full the file interface as well. We're reserved for the enterprise product.
What are some of the features that you have for customers that have a lot of governance and compliance?
Well, so today this is a platform, right? So is there anything specifically built for compliance yet? No, right? I think one of the ideas is that we're building out a community to help kind of flesh those out, right? So Giorgio, do you want to make some comments maybe on some of the early interest we're seeing on extensions?
So the three type of extensions, the data storage backends, obviously want to talk with other clouds. So we're talking to people like Backblaze, for example. We have a hackathon right now where some students are trying to build something around it. Other cloud service providers, existing NAS filers, supporting NFS. All these things are requests we get, and we want to empower people to build these plugins. Data management, so we're talking to companies that know how to do GDPR search. So can you have a GDPR plugin for Zenko so that you get a dashboard of sensitive customer data? We're looking at that. Migration, so that was in the context of compliance, I think. If you want to copy data to an off-site system and you want to do it in a way that's compliant, can you do a plugin for that?
So what are your thoughts at the moment, in particular for HIPAA compliance for healthcare and PCI for finance?
So there will be specific policies we'd have to build there for things like retention and auditing and immutability and things like that. I think those get into a little bit more extensions that we would build in ourselves into the engine. So it's a roadmap. We don't have it in the product today.
There's also a protocol questions. If you look at the S3 protocol, it's not very good for compliance, the verbs of a protocol itself. So the way Amazon does it is with a Glacier API, but our customers don't like it because it's an API where you have a big bundle of an archive. You store the archive, you want one file, you get the full archive. So we need to find the right balance between the S3 protocol and the Glacier protocol to get compliance.
So one of the things that you said on the GDPR bit, so I'm doing quite a lot of that in the UK, and we just get all the time at the moment. So every conversation goes down to that. So at the moment, trying to pull all those tools together, especially over multiple platforms, is really hard. There's a couple of companies that can do it, but you've got to bring about 3 products in to do it. When you said then that you can do it for discovering data that isn't compliant, what's your plans for like the long-term compliancy side of things? So he's looking more into, once you found out what the data is compliant, things like the right to be forgotten. So it's actually taking it down and doing what you said there. So you've got a large bucket of storage and then being able to search on maybe a name and then just being able to pull that out and then being able to recover and delete all that data and remove all that data from one system or multiple different
the only thing we can do is provide the tools and the APIs, because at the end of the day, the metadata is not standard. So everybody uses its own metadata. So we don't know if client is client or author or name or whatever in the metadata.
Right.
So we can give the tools so that the application on top can ask the right things.
Yeah, and it's fair to say we haven't decided to completely go down the path of compliance or GDPR as a solution, right?
Right. Well, I
but
mean,
as a platform that somebody can build on. That's our intention.
You could build a
Right.
policy engine that works on S3 extended metadata.
Yep.
And
Right.
then have other people build plugins.
Exactly.
That's what I was
that
thinking.
translate
Yes.
from that metadata to S3 extended metadata.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that was a point I wanted to make here is today this S3 API on our implementation supports the extended metadata. So you have these XAMZ meta headers. You can attach that to any object. There isn't a metadata search capability today in Amazon, right? So that's something that we're innovating with now, and it's going into the product here in the next couple of weeks.
Does that extended metadata get pushed to the back end?
That extended metadata is managed in our metadata system.
Okay, so if I write...
But we push it to, so if you were to do a copy to Zenko and then ask for it to move it to Azure, we'll also copy the metadata.
Okay, so if I'm...
You've got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does the Zenko policy, what policy choices do I have?
So you have, today we adhere
I want really simple things today because you're just crawling.
Yeah.
So can I say, write everything to this object store and anything that hasn't been deleted
what you get
later,
today
replicate?
In the beginning is a replication policy and a lifecycle policy.
Okay.
So replication follows the Amazon CRR, cross-region replication model. It's per bucket. Per bucket, you can say, I want to filter on these objects and replicate them to this target. And it could be one or more targets.
Fine.
Okay? And then the same with lifecycle,
so I can
right?
create a bucket that when my users write data, it goes immediately into my local ring and then gets replicated out to S3 or Azure.
That's right. So it'll be replication, lifecycle is tiering or transition between the clouds. And then over time we can do others, right? But these are the tangible ones that we are
lifecycle
delivering
has to
now.
do retention too.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So lifecycle has date, basically a date rule that says when to move the objects. You can filter on prefixes or on tags. So there is some ability to filter on what you want.
Okay, you need more than one. You need more than one date.
Yeah, I think. Well, it's per bucket. You can add as many rules as you want.
Yeah,
I think.
but you need do not allow delete before and delete on.
Yeah, so it follows the XML elements of the Amazon Lifecycle API. It's exactly the same API. So whatever they document, that's what we support.
I'm thinking you're going to need to extend it some, but
yeah,
you're right. There's some. There's a few additions that needs to be.
Yeah, they're not that hard to extend.
Right. I think the other message we should send is that we follow the API as much as we can philosophically. Where they don't have something, we will extend. Right. And today we've extended in 3 places. Right. One is this idea of putting a bucket in a specific, putting their objects in a specific backend. We call that location control. Last year we started working with a big service provider who said, how do I meter what you're consuming? That's in CloudWatch in Amazon. So now we have a REST API for that. And now you'll see search is our next one, metadata search. Okay.
Do you guys have APIs that allow people to write connectors to proprietary interfaces, formats and so on and so forth?
What we externalize is our file and S3 interfaces, right? So if they want to write to REST, usually it's S3.
For example, integrate with an oil and gas upstream applications like Geoframe, Petrel and so on. Do you guys have something like that in mind? Or?
Usually it's over NFS or S3. Those are the
But if somebody wanted to
ones,
extend it, we could do it on the open source side, but we don't have a easy, let's look at the doc and extend Zenko right now.
Because I see there's a huge opportunity here, in oil and gas, those big 3, big 4, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Schlumberger, Halliburton Landmark, that sort of things, right? And they would totally go for something like this because it's a mess, right? It's a big mess, and it's been going on for like 50, 60 years.
I like that.
Right, so you got to go there and show them where the metadata is. You can pick things up. You can actually build a lot of things with this. Is it?
So that's one of the reasons why we went open source with this is we keep having people saying, oh, you should support my backend, or you should support my custom application or my custom tape library.
Comes up every day.
That's the way to do it.
The problem with oil and gas industry is they don't like open source. They want to keep everything to themselves, right? They want market share.
We will have to write other backends for sure, but there's a community that's willing to.
Yeah, well,
do it,
when
right?
you get into media and deep into media and entertainment, plugins to things like Spectra's Black Pearl.
It's amazing that you mentioned that.
Because they're
Very timely.
well. So much of what they do is known. I know I'm going to need this data 6 weeks from now because that's when we're going to edit this. And so to be able to build a promote demote engine.
Yeah.
And so when you discover that some members say they have an S3 API, but actually they don't.
Yeah, it's a modified S3.
You need to do.
Yeah, it is a modified S3 because they want to batch things up.
Yep.
Right.
And
It's not a standard server. Exactly.
And you end up being a really nice engine for doing that. It's that data will ingest data and we'll store it on a small ring where the active data lives, and then schedule it. And
we'll need a much smarter plugin for something like that. Agreed. Yeah, it's not standard S3.
But that could get really interesting.
Yeah. So backend extensions is one. API, trying to stay true. Metadata search has been a very popular request. So there is a way to do this where it fits nicely into the semantics of S3. So we know we have the metadata headers.
I love all the people who argue, you should store the metadata with the data in S3. It's like, okay, you can't search it there. You still need a database.
Yeah, so what we're doing is externalizing this through an extended S3 API. It looks like a get bucket REST call, but with search criteria that look like a SQL where clause. Okay, so you can have in this part of the command anything that SQL understands: single attribute, multi-attribute, ands, ors, wildcards, etc. That gets sent to our process.
Anything but regular expressions.
I'm sorry?
I said not regular.
Not regular expressions, right?
Oh, it's SQL, so you can do something.
Exactly, right? And the beautiful thing is, it gets returned back to you as a bucket listing, but with only the keys that matched. So it's very nicely fit into how they expect to do a get bucket.
You can use existing S3 clients.
Right. And underneath the covers, we're doing this as a distributed search, so we can harness the power of doing this across machines. Okay, so with that, we wanted to make this tangible and show you a demo of the Zenko portal. So let's make it real, and then I'll come back for a few more notes.
I'll try to make it real.
Does this run on a Raspberry Pi like the S3 server?
Actually, it could.
It took me about 2 days to get the S3 server running on the Raspberry Pi.
But you're good at running.
Yeah.
You're the one who created a ticket about our Docker being too fat?
Yeah.
Excellent. So I'm going against the engineering team by doing this demo. They asked me not to do it, so we do it.
Oh, we like that better.
So this is...
anything the engineers are afraid of.
Yeah.
Did you make a sacrifice to the demo gods?
I should have. I feel like I should have.
It's called a sticks pack. It's all.
So that's after this session. So we want to make it easy for people to use Zenko, and one of the ways to do that is to make all the admin in a central place and having the people set up Zenko in one click. So something we're going to announce at AWS reInvent, so it's a preview for now. We'll be announcing on November 27, and it will be live at that time. So the idea here is this. So this is the portal. You log in with your Gmail account. You need to create an account. It's a single sign-on with Google. When you log in and you have no instance of Zenko, you can actually start it from the dashboard. And they give you a demo instance so that you can play with it, play with Multicloud. In that case, I already have my demo instance running, so I didn't want to lose time so I did it already. So my dashboard.
Where is this running?
So this actually is running in the cloud, the portal itself, and we say an instance.
Which cloud? Google?
Can I say it on
AWS?
Yeah. It's AWS in that case. Yeah. It could run in any kind of cloud.
And this gets deployed as an AMI image? Is that how you consume it?
So the way that we deploy it now is as a set of lightweight containers. so that we don't have to deploy a full machine for it. So
Okay.
a Zenko instance, we can have hundreds of them on a VM, right? So we do our own Docker images to deploy it. There are if somebody asks for an instance,
Is it something I can pull out of the marketplace, or is it something?
yes, so the Zenko image in the marketplace is coming. So you'll be able to start a Zenko in your own AWS account. Actually, if I log out, I can show it. Maybe I'm going to show that. I'm not going to start an instance, but just want to show something. Maybe, do you have more than one Gmail account?
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's connect with another one.
Many.
Go on to take a look at the webinars of the competitors.
I have 6.
So this is when I do not have an account yet. So I'm getting started with Zenko. So this is our portal in the cloud. Now it's going to ask me for the Google sign-in. Oh, you have one? So the idea is that you can use our instance if you want to do a quick test, quick demo. You have it for 1 month. It's running in the cloud, doesn't matter where it is. But if you want to start your own Zenko, so today you do it on GitHub and you do Docker Hub and you do it manually. We're adding AMI for Amazon, so it's just one click on Amazon to get your instance.
So,
You need the
so,
key you had before.
so how is it licensed as a customer? What am I paying for?
So for now, this is all free. And we'll figure out afterwards the features that we get people to pay for.
Once we got you hooked on it, then we'll
To be
start-
determined.
Don't say that.
Right. The Raspberry Pi will cost.
No, you
Wait
pay for it,
for
I'm
it.
sure. So the encryption, moving to another cloud, we will pay for the ease of use of setting that up quickly.
What about your current Ring product? How is that licensed?
Capacity.
Capacity based.
Yeah.
Used.
Usable.
So as a brand new instance, as a brand new customer of the portal, I'm getting a tutorial. I'm sorry, I have to go through it. So you see the storage capacity that is being used. This is like a blank system just to give us some information. It links to the portal, to the community side of things. And to get started, you have, I think that's the last one. A bit too much. So you can, if you need a Zenko instance, we'll start one for you. If you already have one, you can just register your instance. So when you start a Zenko container, it gives you a unique ID. You take that ID, you put it in that box, and now you can manage your instance wherever it runs. Right?
So if I'm a prospective customer, so I come to you and say, I have a requirement for Zenko, what is the process for designing, then implementing, and then operating the solution?
So today, I mean, we're putting this up as something that people can play with, right? And over time, the open source will offer features that, as Giorgio said, we will think about how to monetize. But then there is a commercial product, right? And the commercial product is something that a lot of Ring customers have expressed interest in. That's a license, and that's based on a consumption model. So not on capacity stored, but on consumption, right?
But you're always going to you'll always be open with your APIs, and
Yes.
everybody can
Of
do
course.
whatever they want.
That's right.
Okay.
Data API, it's S3, right? It's not a Zenko proprietary one.
Okay.
But for someone who's going to be consuming this, what are some of the design constraints? What are the critical requirements that you need to know to consume this properly?
So it's S3. I think if they understand the S3 model and they're writing S3 apps and they want multi-cloud, that's the audience, right?
All right.
It's a developer audience.
Okay, so it's the right fit, that resonates. Implementation, how quick is that?
To be able to stand something up in the cloud?
Yeah.
Minutes,
Start
right?
consuming it.
It's minutes.
Minutes.
Dump
Minute.
the Docker image
Yeah.
and off you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, that's it.
Have you guys got a response for data sovereignty?
You want to keep data in certain geographies?
Yeah.
Well, the response right now, and it may not be sufficient, is that we have this bucket location control, right? You can say this bucket gets pinned to this endpoint, and that endpoint could be a certain region.
Can it be
Right.
audited?
I think that's where we probably need more,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
But today you can say this bucket lives in a certain place.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just to go back to the existing instance that I have here, what you see is statistics about memory usage, CPU, the usual stuff, and all the config for your different access keys. So if you want to add an account, for example, Giorgio as already exists, Giorgio 2, it will generate the access keys, the credential, the secret key. Also all the different locations. See, I want to add Azure, for example, as one of the backends. I will click on Azure here and insert my Azure credentials. Now I can put into that bucket, it will go to Azure. So I'm taking S3 to Zenko, that talks the native Azure Blob Storage protocol to Azure in the backend. There's also local storage if you want to use existing storage that you have. These are typically Docker volumes. If you use local file system, so it supports all the existing Docker volumes that exist on the market today. And so we make it easy for people to get started with Zenko.
So this is the portal that's stored. So where are the credentials stored?
We store the credentials are stored in the Zenko instance. Okay, the portal never sees any sensitive data.
Okay.
We don't store that data.
Like the Azure credentials. They never go to the portal.
So basically what happens is we store a backup that's encrypted in the portal. So if you were to lose your instance, you can start again. But we never see, it's encrypted by Zenko, not by us. So we never see the actual credentials. So even if it hacked, like Equifax, forgot the name, there's nothing that you can steal from us. We only have encrypted data. Okay. So I wanted to do a quick tour. We're going to add search into that portal. And at reInvent, we're adding a wizard so that you can say, take that data from this Azure container and send it to that Amazon bucket, click go, and it will do that automatically. So 0 config, 0 command line. That's the goal.
So I'm a customer, I'm consuming this now, it's a production system. What are some of the things that you can do to operationalize this? Like, for example, you've got your network operations center who are watching this stuff 24/7.
Things like monitoring and stats and all of that. So the engine does have health checks on an API side. We have key performance indicators. Some of that needs to get plugged still into this portal, so it'll be a monitoring dashboard. But the back end does know how to externalize all the interesting stats and metrics. Yeah. All right, so before we go on to the next topic, we wanted to share one kind of brainstorming idea behind Zenko. Since we can do multi-cloud storage, this makes you start thinking, what is the durability of a single cloud, right? We know that popular services quote things like 11.9s and 99.95 availability. They give you service credits if something goes out. We have seen a lot of news, obviously, about apps and services that depend on a single cloud and being susceptible to outages, right? It's not isolated to one vendor. It can be even vendors that go out of business. So we started thinking, well, what do we gain in durability if we start going and storing data across multiple clouds? The 11.9s become something astronomical, right? You can actually further improve that with versioning. You get immutability. We also get DR because you have 2 sites. So the data becomes very, very bulletproof for most events. But even more interesting is data availability, right? Think about the chances of losing 2 cloud regions at the same time or 2 entirely separate cloud services at the same time. It's a very, very small probability. So what's the cost, right? You have to start thinking about storage costs, bandwidth costs, maybe transaction costs. To various degrees, those are going to have an impact. One of the things we were interested in is this a very big impact, right? The idea that you can put data into the cloud for free, but egress is often charged for. So we started digging a little bit and came up with a few conclusions. We built a simple 3-year TCO model. We put a petabyte in the clouds and we said, let's store a single copy versus replicated copies across multiple cloud services. Our first conclusion or assertion was the bandwidth is actually a very small percentage of the TCO. So we did the math, and you'll see a chart here. It turns out that depending on which cloud services you use, if you use 2 regions in one cloud, or if you go across the internet to another cloud, you can be somewhere in the 1% to maybe 5% range of your TCO, just for the bandwidth. So it's pretty small. More interesting is if you start being very creative with your optimal use of the different clouds, you can actually get the cost of two copies in the clouds as low as a single copy. Okay? So
using those second-tier clouds.
Yeah, so you can start being very creative about who you use and where you store the data. Yeah. And some of them are actually free for egress, right?
Yeah,
so that can be even more optimal.
Egress is the part that seems to me to be the bugaboo in multi-cloud.
It's something you can optimize, but it's a small piece.
I'm going to shift my stuff rapidly from one cloud to another. All they have to do is mess with how much they charge for egress, and it'll blow the benefit.
Exactly. So this is replication, right? which is full copies. We can start thinking about how to be even more
Yeah, egress is really only
optimal on this, but this is
problem
kind of a
either
striking
or.
thing, right?
Yeah, but egress is really only a problem
That
in the
left
either or
chart
model.
includes the egress
Yeah,
charges?
this
Yeah.
includes it all. We modeled it all.
The egress is less than 1% in some cases.
It's
over
actually
course of 3 years.
0% in some cases.
It's so funny because a lot of other vendors really put that one up in big red lights and say, hey,
Yeah.
this is where you're in trouble.
One of the big vendors actually has 0 egress. So that makes it very
IBM changed to have the cost built in, didn't they?
But it's
Yeah.
also a question of
Azure.
scale. You feel it
Yeah.
less as a percentage when you're dealing with a petabyte. You're not moving that much.
Yeah, I
data
guess
over.
Right.
you're dealing with like.
That's right.
You're right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Terabyte
obviously
versus
there's
petabyte.
different workloads that are going to change this,
Yeah,
but
well,
this
and
is a petabyte up, right?
Yeah,
And this is
it
S3
also-
because the Glacier egress is more expensive.
Yeah, this is
To
not
live on
Glacier.
Right.
Right.
And is this S3RR or IA? Or
It's the full,
the regular S3?
the regular S3.
So it's even
Yeah.
less if you do.
yeah.
It's less if
Because
you
if
be
you,
less.
you can do reduced redundancy if you have another
Right.
cloud, right?
Yeah, we modeled S3, Azure hot tier. You know, they also have cool and they have an archive tier, and then some of the very aggressive other services.
So what would be your data mover in this scenario?
Zenko.
And it's got what bandwidth between the clouds?
It's basically what it's the internet, right, and the cloud.
It can be in the, like, you get a Zenko in the
Right.
cloud being a data mover,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
In,
In the
you'd have
cloud.
an
Yeah,
instance
you
in
have
all the
Zenko
clouds
running
too, right?
in AWS.
Yeah, I
get
get
that.
one of
How
those.
I
fast
get
you
that,
can move
but
your
what is...
data into Azure is how big a pipe there is between them, and you have no way to know.
Exactly, that's the point I was asking the question.
And
because
certainly,
has anybody actually looked at
AWS
that?
and Microsoft are smart enough to know what traffic is cloud to cloud.
Exactly.
And could start throttling and playing other games to make life easy.
So it might be less about the TCO and more about
I've
the
never
fact
seen
that
a
it's just not
benchmark of it.
practical.
Have you got numbers about
No.
interconnect? Because I would love to do a benchmark. And
No,
you can do
well,
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
performance, you're
Just-
saying, yeah.
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 Right.
you know
Let's start.
That's the next step.
Yeah.
So we wanted to look at, is this cost prohibitive? Right?
Yeah, but-
As a first step.
right.
And it looks like there's something promising here.
No, 2 copies looks. I mean,
Brilliant.
Yeah.
for me, it would be, well, now that I can write 2 copies, I'll use Wasabi and B2 because I don't have to worry about whether either one of them is going to go out of business on me.
Yeah.
But
Definitely,
one or the other worries me. A combination of 2.
You feel pretty
They're
good.
not, well, they're not going to go out of business at the same time.
Exactly. You're gonna have 1 week to move your data.
Right.
Stephen
No,
used to
kidding.
work for Novonix.
Aha. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So that's it on Zenko. Hopefully we fueled some thoughts here. And I think next we're going to move on to Yannick.
Quick question. So that financial modeling slide that you
Yeah.
had there, is that something that you see will be a part of Zenko as a product?
Multi-cloud storage.
Yeah.
The ability to store
Financial
across
planning,
clouds.
The ability to go, okay, if I do this
It's
and do that.
possible. I mean, we don't have to go down that path, but there are companies that do that. Can we leverage that and bring some of that intelligence in? Yes.
Oh, yeah, it'd be really nice
Yeah.
to have in the portal.
Yeah.
Create me a bucket. and
Optimize.
and have optimization choices.
Yeah.